Is the NFL trying to sabotage the Seattle Seahawks again? Alright, what's up everyone, I'm Filoki, and today we're going to be talking about a pretty interesting topic when it comes to the Seahawks and the NFL as a whole. Before we get into that though, I just want to preface this video by saying no, I do not believe the NFL is sabotaging the Seattle Seahawks, or any team for that matter. This is really just a video with a hyperbolic title to give me an excuse to talk about a topic that I think is pretty important when it comes down to the entire NFL as a whole. But I just wanted to make sure that I preface this video because the last time I talked about a potential NFL sabotage on the Seattle Seahawks, when I was talking about how they were going to travel the most miles this year and they were top 5 in miles for like the past 5 years, I accidentally cut out the part where I mentioned that of course it wasn't sabotage. I just wanted to talk about the topic, and that caused a lot of confusion and a lot of issues. So I just wanted to make sure that I preface this video so that everyone could see that this is not me going after the NFL saying they're sabotaging the Seahawks, just a hyperbolic title to talk about a topic that I think is pretty important. But now to get into the video, as every NFL fan knows, the NFL is pumping in crowd noise for home teams at home games because there aren't fans, and even places that can have fans, it's a limited number, so they're still pumping in crowd noise. Of course, this makes sense because most teams don't have fans at their games because of the coronavirus, and even teams that do have fans, it's at a limited capacity, so it makes sense that the NFL would pump in crowd noise to make it so that NFL players aren't just playing in complete silence. But the problem that I have with the pumped in crowd noise is the fact that it's mandated to stay at a steady rate of 70 decibels, no higher, no lower, and honestly, that just doesn't make sense to me. Home field advantage is one of the most important things in any sport, and the NFL especially, because it's so momentum based on a drive-by-drive basis, having fans is something that's super important. Of course, you can't have fans at most games because of the coronavirus, but one of the biggest things that helps a team gain home field advantage is how loud their fans are compared to other teams' fans. Say for example, you take a Seahawks home game versus a Jets home game. The Jets home game is going to be significantly quieter than a Seahawks home game because Seahawks fans are one of the loudest fan bases in the NFL. Of course, the Jets have been a very bad team for quite a few years. There's not going to be a single chance that their fan base is going to be super supportive of them if they even fill out the stadium. And of course, there are a lot of teams in the NFL that, like the Seahawks, have great crowds, amazing fan bases that are loud, and they're very supportive of their team. And when you look at the records for the loudest stadiums, the Seahawks recorded 137.6 decibels in 2013, and that's not even the highest. The Chiefs in 2014 at 142.2 decibels. That is absolutely insane. And of course, I'm not exactly sure how the multiplication of decibels works because it's a very weird system, but I'm pretty sure that's a little bit over 50 times the sound of 70 decibels. Now, of course, 142 decibels is the top of the top. There's no way that it's anywhere near the average decibels that a stadium is at. I don't know exactly what the average is. I'd assume it's right around 100, but 142, of course, that's insane, but it just shows the amount of impact that a crowd can have. Because imagine being the team going down late in the game, having a crowd be anywhere near like 130, 140 decibels because their team just went ahead with like a minute left. You're trying to put together a drive with 1 minute left in the game to actually go down and win the game, and you have 130 to 140 decibels pumping through your ears. That's of course going to make it difficult for any team. That's going to mess up play calling, snap counts, everything that a team can do that is dependent on having the ability to hear themselves. And that's why I think 70 decibels is absolutely too low for any team, especially a good team like the Seahawks or the Chiefs or the Saints or the Ravens even. 70 decibels is the volume of an average vacuum cleaner. Imagine you're sitting in a living room and someone's vacuuming the house. Of course, it's going to be annoying because it's loud and it's interrupting what you're trying to hear, say you're watching TV or something, but that's nowhere near what it's like to be in an NFL stadium. You're not annoyed by the sound. You are completely unable to hear anything else. You can't really talk to the person next to you if there is an NFL stadium at over 100 decibels, 120 decibels, because I mean, I've been to one game in my entire life of the NFL, and that was the Seahawks-Rams game in November of 2018 at Rams. The Seahawks ended up losing that game 36-31, I believe, but it was an absolutely amazing game. It was a close game most of the time. It was an entertaining game, and I don't think that there was a single point where I could talk to the person beside me and actually be able to hear them consistently. Of course, like I said, this was a Rams home game, and the Rams were doing amazing this year. I think this was a year that they went to the Super Bowl, but I mean, a Rams-Seahawks game, that's a divisional game. I could only imagine what Seahawks home games against a divisional opponent would be like, but this was a Rams game, and it was a very open stadium, and easily, when they did the make some noise and they show like the decibel levels in the crowd, that was easily over 120 decibels just midway through the game, just for no reason. You know, there wasn't a huge touchdown that was scored. They were just in the middle of a drive after a timeout, and they said make some noise, and of course the stadium was over 120 decibels, and that's something that a stadium could easily reach, especially after a team has scored a touchdown going up late in the game. And that's why I believe it's so important for momentum. Even 120 decibels, which isn't anywhere near the 142 decibels that the Chiefs had for the record, is 30 times louder than 70 decibels, which the NFL is pumping in now, which is absolutely insane. Imagine a crowd that is just randomly told to get loud in the middle of a drive, not after a crazy touchdown or a crazy big play or a late game drive that they have to try to get some momentum. They have to make it hard for the other team to score. 120 decibels just randomly in the game when they're told to get loud. 32 times what the NFL is pumping in. There's no way that 70 is enough. Take the Week 5 matchup between the Seahawks and the Vikings. Of course, the Vikings were killing the Seahawks in the first half, 13-0 at halftime. Not a good game for the Seahawks whatsoever. But early on in the second half, the Seahawks had a huge 21-point swing where they got a touchdown, forced a turnover, got another touchdown, forced another turnover, and then got yet another touchdown to give 21 points, 3 touchdowns in less than 2 minutes of game time. And throughout that entire sequence of scoring 3 touchdowns in 2 minutes, the stadium maintained a level of 70 decibels, which is the sound of a vacuum cleaner. Imagine that. Imagine you're in an NFL stadium where the home game goes on a 21-point swing after struggling in the first half, and the stadium just maintains a low level, the same level as a vacuum cleaner, just a bit of an annoyance to the other team. No, there's no way that that's happening. In that Vikings game, of course, after that 21-point swing, the next drive, the Vikings came down and scored a touchdown. There's no way that's happening in an actual home game for the Seahawks if they had fans during that. Imagine the first touchdown, Seahawks fans are great. The Seahawks score a touchdown, the crowd is instantly well over above 100 decibels, if not over 100 decibels the entire time before that anyway. And then a turnover almost instantly on the next drive for the Vikings, the decibels go way up. And then a touchdown on the second play of the drive after just forcing a fumble, the decibels continue to go up. And then the next play after that, the Vikings throw an interception where KJ Wright gets a one-handed pick, the decibels continue to go up. And then the very next play, Chris Carson has a 29-yard touchdown run where he breaks multiple tackles, throws off one of the best safeties in the league. There's no way the crowd is going to maintain anything near 70 decibels. That stadium is going to be going insane. There's no way the Vikings are going to be able to hear play calling in their helmets. The snap count's going to be all messed up for the Vikings. I don't see a single chance that the Vikings score a touchdown on that next drive like they did in that game. And that's just one example for the Seahawks. There are a ton of other teams that have made big comebacks. There are a ton of other teams that have been making big plays. Some very close games this year. There's absolutely no chance that any game this year would be at 70 decibels, except for maybe a Jets game. Now, the problem that I have with this is the fact that I don't think the NFL is going to do anything about it. Now, of course, what's keeping fans out of the stadium is the coronavirus, and that's something that the NFL has no control over. Ideally, the United States and the world as a whole will be able to figure something out to try to stop the coronavirus, kind of fix the situation that we're in right now, but no one has any idea what the future holds, and that's something that I think the NFL needs to take into account and try to create a plan at least for the playoffs. Of course, home field advantage is very important in the regular season because you have to win games to be able to make it to the playoffs, and a home field advantage and having fans in the stadium helps you win those games because it gives you a lot of momentum and it hurts the other team because of how loud they can be. So a team like the Seahawks will most likely have better success at home than a team like the Jets, who doesn't have fans most of the time because they're such a bad team. But when it comes to the playoffs, win or go home, home field advantage is the most important thing that you have, because you can demoralize a team if you score a big touchdown and the fans just completely ruin their next drive. Fans are such a huge part, and of course, hopefully there are fans at games in full capacity by the time the playoffs start. But we have no idea if that's going to happen, and we can't bet on that happening. If the NFL doesn't have something figured out by the time the playoffs start and there are no fans in the stadium and they maintain this steady 70 decibel level, that's going to be absolutely horrible. And that's why I wanted to make this video, because this 70 decibel rate really doesn't make sense to me at all. Home field advantage right now is basically non-existent. The only advantage the home team has is not having to travel, and of course that's a big advantage, but fans is what makes home field advantage. Supporting their team, creating energy, creating momentum, hurting the other team, messing up play call and snap counts. That is super important for any team at home, especially teams like the Seahawks, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Saints, just great fan bases that are going to be loud every single home game no matter what's happening with their team. And that's something that teams are missing out on because it's a 70 decibel rate. 70 decibels is not going to hurt the other team, and a steady rate of 70 decibels isn't going to create any momentum for the home team. Something that I definitely think the NFL should look into is taking the average home stadium decibel level for any team, making that the baseline, maybe putting it a little bit lower when something happens for the other team, kind of demoralizing the crowd sometimes, put it like 5 or 6 decibels lower whenever the other team scores a touchdown, and it kind of just takes the wind out of the crowd. But when the home team scores a touchdown, maybe for the next drive, put it up 5 or 6 decibels because the home field has a bit more hype. And take a fourth quarter decibel average. I mean, it's probably pretty easy to find that. I bet the NFL probably has those numbers, that like a fourth quarter average decibel level for a home game when the team has the ball, when the other team has the ball. take as much information as you can to try to at least make something relatively close to what a home game would be, especially for the playoffs. Maybe don't implement it right now into the regular season, but you have to have something different for the playoffs, because there's a pretty good chance that fans aren't going to be allowed at stadiums for the entire season, especially not in full capacity. So if the NFL doesn't have something different to do for the playoffs, I don't think the playoffs are going to have any meaning whatsoever, because of course, I mean, it's the playoffs, it's big games, but if you don't have any elements of home field advantage throughout the playoffs, there's going to be a huge asterisk next to the entirety of the playoffs. Say some crazy underdog story happens where like the worst team that barely made it to the playoffs somehow wins the Super Bowl. There's going to be an asterisk next to that run, because people are going to look back on that and be like, well, you know, everyone's had a steady 70 decibel rate. It's not like they were playing away every single game and they just overcame that home field advantage that the other team has and won the Super Bowl. No, they had an even playing field every single game. That's something that I think the NFL needs to look at, because home field advantage is important in the regular season, of course, but the regular season, maybe you could do without, because they're still figuring something out. They have to figure something out by the playoffs, if nothing else. And of course, like I said earlier on in the video, this is not sabotage towards the Seattle Seahawks. I think this is just something that is a mistake by the NFL and should be changed before playoff time, at least, hopefully before the meaningful games late in the NFL season. But let me know down below in the comments what you think. I believe this is a pretty big issue, something that's going to be important, especially when it comes to the more important games later on in the season. It's going to be important when it comes to the playoffs, and I hope that the NFL has something figured out if fans aren't allowed to attend games in full capacity, or pretty full capacity, by the time playoffs start. But like I said, let me know down below in the comments what you think. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. Have a great day.